Thank you for attending and welcome to our meeting of the Economic Development and Skills Policy Committee. I'm Ben Miskell, I'm the Deputy Chair of the committee. Martin Smith, who is the Chair of the committee, is at another meeting today. The meeting today is open to the public. We've received no questions from members of the public. Please can we request that mobile telephones and other such equipment are switched to silent mode so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting. There's no fire test that's planned today. If there's an emergency evacuation, please take instruction of the Town Hall staff, and the assembly point is in Tudor Square. If I could go around our room today and just ask the Economic Development and Skills Committee members to introduce themselves one by one. Councillor Crossland.
Good afternoon, Councillor Curtis Crossland, member for Bayton Ward.
Good afternoon, Councillor Barbara Masters, member for Ecclesall Ward.
Councillor Henry Nottage, member for Hillsborough Ward.
Paul Turpin, Green Councillor for Gleadless Valley.
Minesh Parrott, Councillor for Crooks and Crosspool Ward.
I'm Tom Hunt, I'm Councillor for Walkley Ward.
Councillor Jane Dunn.
Thank you very much. So that leads us into item 2, which is apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies for absence?
Just Councillor Martin Smith.
Thank you very much. Item 3, which is exclusion of the public and press, if that's relevant. I believe that we have no cause to do that. No cause to do that. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Can I ask whether any member wishes to declare any item of business on the agenda which would lead them to declare an interest? And if so, please do refer to that item of business and state whether it's a pecuniary or personal interest, and ideally outline the reason for that declaration. Councillor Nottage.
I'm part owner of a business that received a carbon audit under the Shared Prosperity Fund, but we have not applied for any funding following that audit.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nottage. Is it possible to note that in the minutes? So it's on the public record. Thank you for disclosing that to us. Are there any other declarations of interest for members? I can't see anyone indicating, so we'll therefore move on to our next item, which is item 5, minutes of our previous meeting. Members should have a copy of those papers in front of them. I'd like members, with their agreement, to approve them as a correct record, and it's the minutes that were held on our meeting, I think on the 18th of January 2023. In your pack, it'll be pages 11 to 20. Before we seek to approve them, are there any kind of matters that need further clarification or matters arising from those that people would like to bring up? Councillor Hunt.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I wondered if on item 8.23, which was about the opening up a dialogue with South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority about the importance of multi-year adult education funding, whether that had begun to take place. We asked for those discussions to begin, and then the other one I wanted to ask about was item 10.22, which was that we agreed the chair of the committee would write to the Mayoral Combined Authority to seek assurance about the second year business support programme funding. And again, I'm just wondering if that letter had been sent.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hunt. I'm going to ask Dana Buckley whether she has any knowledge of whether those letters have been sent. Yeah.
Just on the letter with regards to the SPF funding, we received confirmation of the funding before the letter got to go, so we didn't send it because we got confirmation through the MCA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dana. Tom, does that satisfy your point?
On the second one it does, but the chair might need to, in his absence, follow up about the multi-year funding, I suppose, for adult education, unless there's an answer that can be provided now.
At present, I can't provide that answer, but I think it would be good if that would be noted in the minutes as something that we could go back and ask the chair of the committee to take forward. And I see a suggestion from Councillor Turpin that could be shared with the rest of the committee. I can't see that Councillor Smith would have an objection to that. Councillor Paresh.
All right. Thank you, Chair. Just on 9.2, I wanted to check. So I wanted to check if our accreditation bid from Market and Sheffield has been formally submitted, and if we have any initial feedback on it, or just what stage that's at the moment.
Yes, it has been submitted. We haven't had any feedback as yet. They just closed the window at the end of January, so they're still looking through them. We have, however, hosted a key contact in Visit Britain to talk about accreditation here and start to work on that for Sheffield and South Yorkshire. So we are progressing that and getting ready for the next stage. Thanks.
A point of order from Councillor Crossland.
Thank you. It's just for clarification, really. I don't actually think that committees have matters arising on the agenda, do we? Isn't it just agreement of minutes rather than matters arising?
I think that is certainly correct. I think it's custom and practice that we would go through the minutes, and if there are any issues that members wish to raise, it's often an opportunity for people to bring those up at that particular point. Are there any other points that people would like to make before we potentially pass the minutes? Councillor Nottage.
Incredibly minor point, thanks, Chair. At 9.2, paragraph 2, it says an information briefing on Market Sheffield. Could we amend that to say Marketing Sheffield, which I believe was the intention?
So that's page 17, and I think you mentioned 9.2.2, and it should read Marketing Sheffield. Is it okay for that to be changed in the minutes? Thank you. Well done for spotting that and being so diligent. It appears that members have made a significant number of contributions there with regards to the minutes. Are we happy to approve them as a formal record of our last meeting? I can see no dissent from the committee, so those minutes have been approved. Which then takes us to our next item, which is item 6. It will be custom and practice for us to receive public questions and petitions, which is a really important function of our committee system. On this occasion, we received no questions, I understand. So there are no questions or petitions for us to discuss, which takes us to item 7, which is an opportunity for us to look at and review the work programme. Members of the committee will note that it's on page 21 of the agenda, and the officer that we expect to run us through that, I think, is Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. So there are no items referred from other committees to note this time, and we ask that the committee approves the amendments at Appendix 1, and if there are any items to be added for consideration, we can raise those now. And if there are any questions, officers would be happy to answer if possible.
I have a point to make about the date of the next meeting, which I think is on page 27. I think it's down as the 29th of March, but I think it's actually the 15th of March, if that could be changed. I saw Councillor Masters, I think, indicate. Councillor Masters.
It's just a clarification, really. Sorry. Right. Can I just double check that the forum for reviewing the effects of the CAS and the potential bus lane changes on Ecclesall Road, Nabydale Road, is an issue for the TRC, as opposed to us?
Thank you very much, Councillor Masters. Can I ask for some guidance from the Director of Legal and Governance?
Thank you, Joe. Sorry, which item was that again? Just
Well, it's not. It's an issue, and I just want to make sure that I know which committee it's going to be referred to. It's the impact of the CAS and the potential for bus lane changes on Abbeydale Road, Ecclesall Road. That will be dealt with by the TRC, not us, as economic development.
very likely. CAS covers a huge range of things. It's obviously it's an intervention that affects directly the highways and street scene, but of course its outcomes are aimed at air quality, which touches on other areas. The short answer, I think, is that I'll take that point away, I think, and ensure that it goes to the correct committee and perhaps report it back through, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Masters, are you satisfied with that response? Thank you. Councillor Perret?
Thank you, Chair. So it's something I raised at full council to Councillor Smith, and he asked me to bring it here at the work programme, just that we have, in any discussion about green jobs and skills, talks with trade unions that represent workers in already existing green jobs about recommendations for supporting already existing green jobs as we look to develop a green jobs offer for the city. So I would like to propose to the committee that we have bring in some relevant trade unions as we develop that strategy work.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I think you referred to the item on page 27 at our next meeting particularly. Are you suggesting that we make sure that representatives of trade unions are also part of that discussion at the meeting?
It doesn't necessarily have to be at the meeting. I think I would welcome some formal consultation with trade unions beforehand.
Diana, is it possible to ask whether that could be something that you would advise that we should put into the work programme there?
Well, that item next time is very much kind of a context setting around what current the employment skills landscape looks like, and the work that we've done with the committee in the background around the employment, the green jobs and skills strategy. So I would suggest maybe after the next committee, when we've got a steer from yourselves, that would be the best time to engage as we go forward to develop them into strategies. I think we're asking the committee the permission to develop those strategies now, having done that context. Are you comfortable with that?
I am, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't see any other contributions. In fact, I see Councillor Dunn.
Yeah, thank you. It's building on what Councillor Barbara Masters said regarding the impact on Abbeydale Road with the red lines. I think, to be fair, across the whole city, we do need an economic evaluation of all our changes with our road traffic. We cannot just single one out. So, you know, it's really, really important that we look at all the measures that we're changing and have that measured against the economic impact, so we can see, you know, because we can push traffic off one place onto another, and I think otherwise we'll seem to be favouring one area rather than another. And I know that is being discussed quite heavily, but I think it would be good moving forward as we roll these out with our lessons learned, as I know Councillor Hunt's been working really hard on that the public and the business community of Sheffield realise that we are also helping support their economic development. So I haven't seen that anywhere in the programme, but I do think that needs putting in.
I think Councillor Dunn raises an important point about the cross-cutting nature of some policy areas in the council. You know, clearly changes to traffic and changes to the flow of traffic and movement of people around the city has huge economic impact as well. It might not be that this committee makes the formal decision on those particular areas, but we should still be cited in anything that does have an economic impact. Councillor Masters?
Yeah, thank you. It's exactly the point I was going to make under the Shared Prosperity Fund, but I was going to elaborate on that because I mean, I can do it now, what I was going to say, because reading the documents, I was very concerned about the gaps in it. So shall I do it now rather than sort of in the Shared Prosperity Fund, because it's, again, because you followed up with what I was saying. I'll save it for the, I heard that. I'll save it for the next item, but I will sort of go through what I was going to say. Okay, thank you.
Can I make a suggestion, Councillor Masters and Councillor Dunn? It would seem to be advantageous to put that into the work programme as potentially a paper for the next committee meeting, and even if that's an impact, even if that's a short or brief update about the economic impact, would that satisfy what you're asking for?
No, because it actually impacts on access to the economic sort of recovery fund, which is why I do want to sort of say my little piece. It's not long, but again, the whole point is everything works in silos, and we can't do that as a city going forward. So it's just a comment, but I will save it for a comment under the Shared Prosperity Fund. Thank you.
That's fine. We can deal with that later on in the agenda. Councillor Turpin?
Thanks very much, Ben. I fully support what Jane and Barbara are saying about looking into the economic impact of road changes. I think it's important to note that we need to, as a council, not to be working in silos, and neither should we be using an economic impact as the driving reason to make changes, but rather we should note and we should make sure that impact on public transport, impact on air quality, impact on the climate change are also factors that we take into account and not look at just one of those factors.
Thank you, Councillor Turpin. I think those comments have been noted, and hopefully in the next item we'll be able to have further discussions about it. So it seems that a number of members have made contributions about the work programme, item 7. I can see that there is another contribution from Minesh.
Thank you, Chair. And I realise with Rebecca being in the room, we may already get an update. I just wanted to check if the Tinsley Art project is going to come to the next meeting. I know it's on the work programme but not signed. But
Dan, are you able to update?
Yes, we have spoken to legal on this, and the decision actually won't sit with EDS, the formal decision. So we will be circulating an informal briefing by email to all members of this committee. We've briefed the chair, the co-chair and the spokesperson already, and then that formal decision will go to the appropriate committee.
Can we ask which committee that is?
It's either going to be S&R or Finance Subcommittee because of the capital expenditure involved.
Thank you. So we've had a discussion about our work programme. It is fairly light after the election in the next municipal year, but we imagine that will be fleshed out in the coming weeks as part of discussions that happen perhaps outside this meeting. Are we all agreed on the work programme? If any member wishes to dissent, please do raise your hand. I can see no dissent in the room. So our work programme has been agreed at this particular meeting. That does move us on to item 8, which is about the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and local business support projects. In your pack, that's page 33 of the agenda, and Yvonne Asquith is going to run us through this particular part of the agenda. Yvonne.
Thank you. Yeah, so all the information is in the committee report, and we are asking today to approve the use of 4.55 million of UK SPF revenue funding to provide the 4 key elements of business support that are highlighted in the paper. Just to say that 4.55 million is revenue funding out of a total of 5.4 million allocation to Sheffield City Council under the Local Business Support UK SPF funding. And the core projects are listed and provided in the paper, so I'll just run through those really quickly. The Launchpad programme, so £850,000 of revenue funding for start-up and early stage support, which builds on the current regional Launchpad programme. Productivity and digital innovation grants, again building on a programme that's already been successful in Sheffield and South Yorkshire. It's £2.1 million of revenue funding to enable SMEs in Sheffield to access grants and support around productivity and digital adoption within businesses in Sheffield. A low carbon programme, 1.3 million, again, revenue funding to provide audits and grants to improve energy efficiency. This builds on the low carbon programme, which Henry mentioned earlier, funded through ERDF. And also to note that the low carbon programme, Sheffield City Council is the accountable body for that South Yorkshire wide programme. And finally, continuation of RISE, £300,000 of revenue funding, which will provide graduate jobs in Sheffield SMEs. And that's a partnership programme with both Sheffield Hallam University and the University of Sheffield. So the paper does go on to highlight the individual outputs and further detail about each of the individual programmes. And also just to stress really the consultation that has happened around coming to the conclusion with those 4 core elements. We've worked really closely with our regional partners, with SIMCA, both universities and each of the 4 local authorities. And, you know, we're really pleased that we're able to continue programmes that have delivered, you know, significant support to businesses in Sheffield with our UK SPF allocation. The paper also does highlight a number of additional priorities. Those 4 key elements will not provide the transformational change that we need in Sheffield. We are aware of that. UK SPF funding is not significant, so there will be now ongoing conversations with that regional group to look at those priorities and bring those back to the committee. The priorities are included in the paper. And like I say, we can bring that back to the committee. Other consultation has been through workshops with committee members also. And again, I suppose that's the main detail. I'm happy to take individual questions about any of the specifics within the paper as well. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you very much, Yvonne, and thanks very much for the immense amount of work that you and officers have done to put this paper together, but also the work and support that you provide to local businesses there. It's, you know, it's quite impressive. I'd now like to open it up to members for any questions or points that they might have. Masters, Councillor Masters.
Thank you, Chair. And it is the point because, I mean, and basically, my question was, is there a channel between the different departments whose decisions have an impact on each other's policies, which is what was raised earlier. I have been asked this because I've been working with the business advisors in my ward trying to promote the Economic Recovery Fund and encouraging small business to apply. It's just all business support, you know. The initial response was, there's no point, because if the 12-hour parking restrictions for Ecclesall Road and Abbeydale Road are approved, their businesses will become unviable. The decision on that will be taken, presumably, well, I know it's by TRC. It was clear from the recent meetings with businesses to discuss the ERF that little or no liaison occurs between the economic strategy team and highways on potential conflicts, and the work of one risks undermining the work of the other.
Point of order, Chair.
I said risks.
Councillor Masters, sorry to interrupt you. Councillor Turpin, you have a point of order. What is your point of order?
I believe there's some opinions been presented as facts here, and we established very clearly that no decision has been made on the red lines. And to say that businesses are going to go bust if red lines are implemented is pure opinion. And also noting that the recent rise in threats towards elected members, that members really ought to be very guarded about the language they use and make it clear that no decisions have been made and the public has been consulted and will be further consulted.
Can I answer?
Councillor Masters, if you could just explain what you meant with that point.
When we tried to promote this, this is the response that we got. I have actually asked for highways to meet with the businesses to explain the situation, because I know there's a lot of misinformation out there. But if businesses will not engage with what you are proposing because they fear something that will happen, then that means there is something wrong with the system we use to engage with them. And what I want to see is an improvement, because the business sort of support worker, well, it wasn't, it was the person from your team who tried to do that, wasn't in a position to answer any of the concerns because she didn't have the facts. So I'm not saying, I did say if it goes ahead, this is their fear. We have got to address the perceptions, rightly or wrongly. And it's because the perceptions have not been addressed that we have these issues arising now. So I am not trying to sort of stir anything. I have deliberately said if, because that was part of the consultation. Full stop, you can't deny that, you know. And so because, you know, and I said the work of one risks undermining the work of another, it seems there's no automatic impact assessment made of policies formulated by one department on the policies of another. And that is also the point that Councillor Jane Dunn raised just now. Yet a range of other impacts are done. Even the climate change impact assessment on transport only deals with the travel advisors in the course of their work. Now, to me, that is not a climate change impact assessment on the policies, you know, and it's everything's being undermined. To move forward, we can't have departments working in silos. We can't justify one hand not knowing what the other's doing. So all I'm asking for, and my original thing, is there a channel of communication so that this situation does not arise and we do not get misinformation and fear? Because I'm sorry, it's the fear that actually stops people investing. Doesn't matter about the actuality, fear undermines. And I don't want to see our businesses go because of things that have been said that they feel that they've had no input into. It doesn't matter what the reality is. Perceptions matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Masters. I'd just like to ask the Assistant Director of Legal and Governance for a view on Councillor Turpin's point of order.
So, Councillor Turpin, I think, raised a concern as to the accuracy of the points presented. Chair, you invited Councillor Masters to perhaps explain the point. I think the committee heard that, and on my hearing, it was raising possibilities rather than making outright assertions. If there's continued disagreement as to the factual accuracy of content, it may not be that we can resolve it today. The officer may be able to respond, but otherwise it might be a point taken away.
Thank you for the advice there. My view is that Councillor Masters raised a point from her experience as a ward councillor. It's legitimate to do so. My view is that she should be allowed to continue to make a point there. Councillor Turpin, I know that you indicated to speak a second ago.
Yeah, thanks. So I did hear reports that Councillor Masters was informing businesses at a recent public meeting that there would be 12-hour bus lanes, which was factually incorrect. This was information I was given in the same way you're claiming the information you have was given to you. I do think it's a good idea that the business team works with the transport team on changes like this, but it's also important that members correct misinformation at every opportunity they have.
Thank you. Sorry, I have to make it clear. There has only been one meeting. There was no mention from me of 12-hour bus lanes. I couldn't even speak at that meeting because I had a throat infection. Or I could get one sentence out and that was it. And how you got hold of that,
Thank you,
never said
Councillor
that.
Masters.
I'm incensed, thank you.
I appreciate, but I think it's important that the meeting doesn't descend into wider contributions about what happened or may not have happened outside at the meeting. I think some legitimate points have been made, particularly about some of the cross-cutting natures of the work that the council undertakes and the need for us to be informed as a committee, even though we're not necessarily cited in that decision. The Assistant Director of Legal and Governance, is there anything else that we need to be mindful of?
No, just simply to address points through the chair so that you can keep the committee meeting running as you want to. So.
Thank you, very much appreciated. With regards to the paper that we've been just discussing, are there any other points that colleagues would like to make in the room today? We've had two contributions. Councillor Turpin, is it about the substantive paper that we're discussing? Yes.
It is, Chair. Thank you. So a couple of questions then. The first one relates to the comparison of the money we will be receiving now and the money we were receiving from the EU. And I just wonder if you could flesh that out at all, and if there is any indication of that funding being continued beyond the 3 years of the SPF. And the second question I'd like to ask is about, because obviously there's a real lot of work going on and a lot of investment, and it's all really good and really welcome. And I just wanted to ask that as a recipient of a Prince's Trust grant when I was about 21, and I found that very useful in setting up a business at that time, if there's anything of that equivalent, so rather than advice and support, is there any hard cash grants for startups as well? Thank you.
Dana?
Thanks, Paul. I think we've discussed at this committee before the amounts of funding that we potentially would have got under the EU versus now. And I think some of that is guesswork, but we do understand that we would have been counted as valid, eligible for transition funding under the EU, which would have meant we would have got more money than we're currently getting. And in terms of SPF continuing after year 3, we've got no indication of what will come after SPF at this time.
So your other question around startup grants, Councillor Turpin. So we understand, so Barnes, the early accountable body for the Launchpad programme, there is an element of grants for startups, which is actually being trialled in other areas. We don't have any detail about that at the moment, but it will be the first time that Sheffield's had startup grants for quite some time. So we're really pleased that that's now part of the programme, and we can provide more information when it becomes clear how much those grants are for, but that will certainly help startups in Sheffield.
Thank you very much for your answers there. I can see Councillor Hunt indicating to speak.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to say I support the recommendations in the report, and I particularly wanted to just come to the additional priorities section, which I think is really important that we kind of just take a moment to look at as a committee. And the line that really jumps out is, this is only going to keep us where we are or marginally move us forward. Now, that's not to say that any of it isn't important. It absolutely is, just to do that. But we should, as a committee, I think, retain our focus on the transformational change that's needed to get us to a high wage, high productivity, high growth, low carbon economy for Sheffield and South Yorkshire. And so, I think when we're thinking about our priorities for the committee beyond the current work programme, it is about focusing in on those transformational priorities. In particular, the one that really I think we should give some time to in future meetings is around early stage finance, thinking how do we scale up businesses so that there's those successful growing small businesses here are encouraged to stay here and grow. And so I think there's an important piece of work that we can do as a committee to make sure that we have ambitious plans around attracting more early stage finance to scale up and grow the existing business base.
Dana, is that something that we're mindful of?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, at the next committee meeting, we're having an evidence session around startup and acceleration, and I'm sure early stage finance will be one of the things that is mentioned. It's certainly a priority that we've been working with the sector and the MCA on, and trying to come up with some proposals for South Yorkshire, as other areas do have early stage finance. There are some funding out there like Northern Gritstone, which the University of Sheffield are a key part of, and we've started to see investment flow from that into Sheffield, into University of Sheffield spin-outs. Some of that is available for non-university spin-outs as well. But certainly we need more early stage finance. So it's definitely an area that is on our agenda that we'll look to pick up next committee and then in next year's work plan.
Thank you, Diana. Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, Chair. And to echo Councillor Miskell's praise of your work on this as well. I did come armed with lots of questions, but because of your really helpful briefing beforehand, lots of them were answered. I just have a new one now on the equality impact assessment. I think the details of impact for sex might have been missed off from the report. If we can have that added on mine it looks blank, but that may just be me misreading it. And just on the general wider, I think it has been missed off, but page 54 for sex, the impact. Okay.
On my copy of the report on page 54, sex is certainly there. There's no details of the specific impact.
Yeah, I think
that's the
what I
point
mean,
that you're making. Dana, is that something that we need to be mindful of?
It is something to be mindful of. It is there in the copy that I've got, but it's on page 66. That's the wrong one, 55.
I guess just when it's published online, can that be added?
I see what, yeah,
absolutely,
okay, yeah.
yeah.
But we can absolutely make sure that if that is just a printing error or something like that, that it's done, yeah, thank you.
The wider point I was going to make is just, I like the recommendation particularly on, for example, the details of impact on BAME communities that we're going to monitor, or that it mentions, participation pathways. Do we have any plans to monitor that impact on different communities and different, on different communities?
Yvonne?
Sorry.
Are you able to help?
Yes, absolutely we do. So all these programmes, we will absolutely be looking at the data for the businesses that we're supporting, ethnicity information and sex information, all of that will be included in the data that we collect, and that's absolutely something that we want to improve on going forward, as we said in a previous committee. So yes, definitely.
I just wanted to add to that, again, an item that we took last time here about having a representative business board to enable us to do some of this work, and just some difficulties in collecting data because sometimes businesses are owned or run in different forms. So often what you're asking the question of is the business entity rather than the individual. So it's a barrier when it's a sole trader, or it's much clearer, but it is a barrier in terms of collecting information when you're talking about a business entity. So we're going to try and draw out kind of ethnicity of staff, makeup and stuff like that, but it's not quite as easy as it always appears to collect data on business entity with respect to some of those characteristics. But certainly in terms of self-employed people, startups and stuff like that, we will be collecting that data.
Completely take the point about difficulties. Yeah, really progressive. That is going to be reported on in the afterwards.
Thank you. I think a number of points there were raised, particularly about the paper that's in front of us, and I can see that we've got a commitment to make sure that the paper that's available on the public website is corrected. Councillor Crossland, you were indicating a short while ago to speak.
Thank you, Chair. As everybody said, a big well done to the team for trying to kind of get every drop of value out of this money from what is effectively a budget cut thanks to Brexit. So really well done to the team. The report does talk about a number of businesses and the number of jobs created, etc., for different projects. But do we have like a value added number to the Sheffield economy? I'm particularly interested in regions of Sheffield to see how the money, the investments are helping different communities in Sheffield grow their economies. But I'm also interested in kind of the human side and whether businesses and startups feel that these projects are working and if there's a feedback loop so we can try and improve them. Because like Launchpad, for example, is in the 6th year now. Do we incrementally improve how it runs and just to make sure that we are getting best value out of this money and making sure that our businesses have the best opportunities that they can?
Yvonne.
Yes, absolutely. And certainly with the Launchpad programme, it's something that we're working on now with other local authority partners and other regional partners about what that programme looks like going forward. The way that people take information on now is quite different than it was three years ago, and we have been very much tied to 12-hour outputs. So people are coming on workshops which help them to kind of start up. It's quite a lengthy process. We are going to look at completely changing that and look at what's better for the customer. There is also an evaluation at the moment for each of those projects that were funded through ERDF, so we will absolutely take on board surveys from customers about their experience in those programmes as well. And we do evaluate as we go on the Launchpad programme and other programmes to check in with businesses and individuals involved about their experience as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Are there any other further questions or comments from members of the committee? No. As the item 8, has a number of recommendations for approval, I'd like to ask whether we are all agreed. If anyone wishes to dissent, please do raise your hand. I can see no dissent from members of the committee, so that item has been agreed on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and our local business support projects. Thank you very much to Diana Buckley and Yvonne Asquith for bringing that report for us today. That takes us to item 9, which is about a progress update on adopting a culture strategy. Members will note that that's on page 79 of our agenda. And presenting it is Rebecca Maddox, a Sheffield City Council officer, and supported by Soraya Falconer, who is Vice Chair of the Culture Collective, and I hope that I did get that right. Rebecca, are you able to start us off and introduce this paper, which members will see is on page 79 of the agenda?
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Miskell. So this report is a direct update from the report that you received in September, which had 3 parts. The first part was proposing that the Sheffield Culture Collective strategy should be adopted as an interim. And then this paper is talking about how we've moved forward to create a new strategy. And Soraya is going to talk a little bit about that in a moment. The second part is about how the City Council is changing its sort of ways of behaving and supporting cultural organisations through putting in expressions of interest. I'll update on that. And it was also, the previous report asked you to agree in principle or support in principle the establishment of a cultural pipeline fund. So I'll be updating on that shortly as well. But first of all, Soraya is going to talk a little bit about the process of building on the brilliant work of the Sheffield Culture Collective strategy.
Hello everybody. So the Sheffield Culture Collective strategy was launched in 2021 and then adopted by you last year, which is great. So I've moved a long way with that, and I can answer questions about some of the deliverables on that, if you like, in a while. But what we do need to do, and was always the intention when you adopted this, was that we would broaden that and develop it to incorporate other areas, so it has the breadth and depth that would represent all the smaller cultural organisations as well, which was necessary to do that, but we came a long way, and it's been a great thing being able to adopt that, because it's demonstrated to other funders, including the Arts Council, that Sheffield is serious about culture, and that culture is now within this committee is also a driver for the economy, that it also adds to the livability of cities, that it helps with recruitment, and that it also supports businesses. So what's been also great is that we, as you were aware from last time, that we have funding for the Culture Collective from the private sector, which is also a really important aspect of this. So the intention is to broaden that, so we're putting that out. There's a paper that's been put together to put this out to tender so we can develop this strategy, and you'll have read in the paper to come to here again by August 2023, we'll have developed this. And this is also autumn
rather than August.
August, yeah.
Thank you.
Autumn. So the work's going to be done over the next few months. And then, well, I suppose, and also the investment in this has been from the local authority, University of Sheffield and the Arts Council in order to be able to deliver that. So in our terms, we think our cultural strategy for the city has been brought, you know, we've done about a third to 40% of that, of what was required, that you adopted, and now we need to complete that. I think that's it at the moment. I can also tell you that it's really important that we have this relationship with the private sector, and the Sheffield Culture Collective is also putting on an event on the 14th of March in the Winter Gardens, which is to showcase some new NPOs and our smaller NPOs and it's for the business community, and we're inviting and we've gone through the business sectors such as the Sheffield Property Association, who support the Culture Collective, the Cutler's Company, Sheffield Digital and the Sheffield Chamber, and we're inviting the business community to come to the Winter Gardens and get a taste of the breadth and depth of what of culture that Sheffield has to offer. Not just the ones we all know and understand, like the theatres and the museums, etc., but all the smaller ones which provide the pipeline and those creative skills that are so necessary to develop a city as well. And we're working collaboratively with the local authority, so we're able to have the Winter Gardens, courtesy of Sheffield City Council, thank you, and we've also got investment from the Sheffield Culture Collective funds in there, and also support from other areas of the private sector who are sponsoring areas of that particular event, which is there to create dialogue between the business community and the cultural community, and some of those smaller cultural organisations who might not also know the language that they need to use on how to approach some of the other parts of the private sector. And I will also say that the private sector in Sheffield, the businesses in Sheffield, some of them are really supportive of some of the cultural organisations. So we're building on a dialogue. It's really important that we have this broader strategy that we're tendering for now, because if we are going to prove that we are serious to other funders and other funding organisations, including the Arts Council, we need to demonstrate ambition. And so this is one of the ways that we are going to bring up our £9 per head for investors to hopefully to compete with some of our London and Manchester fellows who are now getting £33 a head and more per capita. And we need to be able to do that. And we know through our conversations with the Arts Council that we are being heard a lot more clearly now, and they are there and helping to support us. And I will say the work that Di Buckley and Rebecca have been doing over this last year has really helped in bringing in even more money into the city to support culture. I think that's everything, isn't it, for the minute?
Yes, thank you. Soraya has to whiz off shortly, so if there are questions about the cultural strategy part of the report, it might be useful to take those now, and then I'll pick up the final two items after that, if that's okay.
Well, thank you very much for presenting that so clearly, and clearly the passion and an energy for arts and the culture in Sheffield is really, really evident there. So very much appreciated. Appreciate that Soraya has to leave shortly. So if members have any questions specifically to the parts that Soraya may need to answer, that'd be appreciated. I can see Councillor Turpin indicating.
Thank you. Thanks very much. It's just, honestly, I am so happy with the way this is going. It's brilliant. You know, the Sheffield City Council has not got a great history with arts and culture, but things are looking really good and really positive. So yeah, thank you very much. And also to work with outside organisations as well to get it done and to get it progressed. something else that the council didn't used to be very good at, but also getting much better at. So the questions I would like to ask are, when you talk about Sheffield has £9 head and other places have £30 a head, and do you think that we need to be looking at different parts of the arts and culture sector that perhaps draw in more money, such as opera or something? You know, I know the Opera House in Leeds brings in a disproportionate amount of money compared to other parts, other sectors, and if that kind of, you know, if it breaks down by subsector of the arts and culture sector. And the other thing I wanted to say is that, and really what clicked with me is the last item about startups, is that, you know, if we're bringing money in to do projects, then they're going to be only available for established artists and you know, in their field. Are we going to make sure that we're making the terrain for our next future generations of artists? Thank you.
Great.
Well, I'll say something, and then if there's anything else you want to pop in, Rebecca, absolutely. So, first of all, not necessarily opera. It's really, really expensive. But not to say, you know, we have a lot of music. We have one of our parts of the strategy is Harmony Works, I think many of you know, and that's a centre for music education in the city, building on the musical heritage. That develops in, that moves into classical music as well. We've got Brass Bands England who want to be part of that. There's a lot of interest, so that's really building. So that's part of that deliverable. Concerned about have we got the bedding right in order to be able to bring those skills in? Yes, there's a lot of support for independents and freelancers. Some of these smaller organisations, like some of those new MPOs that we've got, are built up on some of those freelancers. So there's an awful lot of support for spreading those skills and nurturing those skills and mentoring those skills. And that's why we want the smaller organisations that then can build into larger organisations, and also creative skills are transferable into business as well, into the business sector. So I think the whole of that sort of integrates. Did I answer most of your question, or do you want Rebecca to ask a bit more? Was there something else?
I think that was a brilliant answer. I would just say that also the refreshed strategy, the whole point of doing it as we are going to be doing it, as a very much co-created, consulted piece of work, making sure that the individual artists and the small community organisations and arts organisations have the opportunity to contribute and have their voices heard. I think that sort of ties in exactly with the points that you make. Sheffield has quite an unusual sort of cultural infrastructure. We have this amazing DIY culture in the cultural sector, with lots of individuals and small groups just getting on with it and being brilliant at what they do. We have kind of a small mid-range and then an even smaller large organisation range, actually. And the whole point of the refreshed cultural strategy is to help create a roadmap so that we can, where appropriate, people can kind of move through those levels more effectively than has happened in the past. For some people, they don't want to move through levels. They're very happy doing what they want, and that's fine. But, you know, I think there's a whole issue about pipeline and sustainability of the cultural sector in Sheffield, which we could do so much better. And this cultural strategy is about underpinning all of that for each level.
Dan?
I just wanted to answer on the funding point as well, because there's some critical pieces of the jigsaw here, of which the strategy is one. But it's also our ability to bid for funding for the Arts Council and Heritage Lottery Fund to then award it. And so that's where the other elements of this paper come in. So the feasibility fund, often cultural organisations need a bit of match funding from the council or some starter funding to get an idea written up. So then it can go and access a lot of different funding pots. And without that kind of flexible pot to support the sector, and sometimes they need like 10%, sometimes it's £1,000 to make £200,000. So it's very small amounts of money that have a lot of leverage. And we haven't had that flexibility and that ability to invest in a pipeline. And that's what the other element of this is. And then the third point was about expressions of interest. And actually, working with funders, so man-marking them now. So we meet with the Arts Council and Heritage Lottery Fund on a monthly basis now, continually asking for more investment for Sheffield, understanding what they need from us and how. Some of that is absolutely investment, accountable body status, and a strategy from the council. They really want to see that. So the more ambitious and bold we are as a council, I think that will be matched back by those funders. But it's a varied piece of the jigsaw, enabling the sector to access funding, us providing some match funding and some support, us providing expertise to put in the bids so that we can actually win them, as well as having that anchor cultural strategy. And all of those things are now kind of happening. So I'm hoping that that starts to bear fruit in the next 12 months.
I mean, in this current climate, we've done very well to get where we are with the funding that is out there at the moment that can help us build on that. And what we've got to understand, this is a 10-year strategy that we're tendering for here as well.
Thank you. Councillor Turpin.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's so good to hear like the passion and the expertise, and really confident and optimistic about the future. And I just wanted to very quickly pick up one point that you raised, Surya, about Harmony Works. It's super exciting. You know, we've got a nationally renowned music hub in Sheffield, and they're going to be moving into this amazing heritage building, you know, that's right there by the train station, and it's really properly going to put Sheffield on the map. And I just wanted to give my full support for that, and expect that other members are also fully supportive of that project, and it's going places, and so is Sheffield. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And there's a website for that, so you can find out more, and I think there's going to be more communications about that as well, that everybody will be able to hear and learn more about it.
Thank you, Councillor Turpin. And Harmony Works is certainly a very exciting project, isn't it, bringing lots to the city. Councillor Dunn, I saw you indicating a short while ago.
Thank you, Soraya. Yeah, really exciting. And I know Councillor Bowler would be really happy because she started all this work many, many decades ago. Well, it feels like that anyway. So every time I hear the culture, I can't help but think this is what Isabel was pushing. If there was one thing, Soraya, that you wish we could unblock, what would that be? It's very easy. Do you know, in the way, how can we get this moving forward a little bit more? What is it that you would like us to do?
Okay, right. So, first of all, for all of you to be ambassadors for this, in order to be ambassadors for this, you need information and content and know what to talk about at what time. Part of the strategy for the Sheffield Culture Collective is that we're establishing the Message House, and we've got some money from the Arts Council in order to be able to work that. And what that will be is a reference point for all of you to be able to check in with what the current messages for the city are in relation to culture, and what the future things are, what we should be saying externally. So it's about that and breaking through all those networks, and not just people who are around. We need more ambassadors, all the councillors within the council. So it's not just the people around this committee, because culture relates to everybody. Everybody does something, even if they just go to public for a cocktail. That's all related to culture. So that's what I would ask that you share with your other fellow councillors. So we need all the councillors to
They do some very good cocktails as well.
Yeah.
Councillor Dunn.
That is music to my ears. I'm really keen on how, like young people, no, not just young people, every person, because culture is for everybody, how they can shape that so it reflects, they feel part of it, especially, as you know, I represent Southey Ward, and the two, like opera and Southey, don't always go together, but you're wrong, because they played me.
Yes.
They did play me Aida on my birthday because we were in lockdown, so that was my gift to them because that's where I should have been. So it's actually, I'm really keen that we shape and form that, and we can do that through our likes and how we actually make sure that the whole city sees that culture's for them, because to me that's one of the biggest barriers, as it's seen as quite
well, it can be
southwest, if you get my drift.
It could be perceived as that, and the key to this is diversity and multiculturalism.
Absolutely,
and on the board of the Sheffield Culture Collective, we've got people from the Cultural Consortium, and we've got Olivier from Sadaka, which is an African organisation. And he's also part of the Race and Equality Commission and the results of that, and that's going to be taken into account with this tender as well. So I hear you, is what I would say, in relation to that. Utopia Theatre, one of the new NPOs, they had I don't know how many people went to the event on Saturday night, but that was amazing, and they've started a youth theatre, which is about going into all the harder to reach communities and establishing different groups and theatrical groups and workshops that relate to that too. So yeah, absolutely.
One final thing, if you give me latitude, is how important music is for dementia and Alzheimer's, and what an important part it plays. And I think that would be a really good link, and I don't know whether we've done that, but we should be putting that through, because there's lots of funding streams on that you might be able to join up, and it would actually provide so much joy and would actually really help on something that I've seen people fade in front of me in my ward, and it's been quite upsetting recently. So I know how much joy they get from it. So if we could, thank you. I'll shut up now, Councillor Miskell.
No, I hear you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dunn, for those contributions. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation today, but also the work that's clearly gone on over the last few years, but in the time between us adopting the interim strategy back in the autumn, because as everyone has said, what we're hearing is terrific. It's raising our ambition as a city and making sure that everyone knows about it, so that we're not just scaling up our sense of ambition, but we're telling the world. So I think it's good. And as various other members have said, it's not just us that is ambitious. The public are ambitious for Sheffield too. Everyone wants to. There's so much talent in this city, and our job is to make sure that it's nurtured as well. So when we're moving at pace now, and it's great that we're going to bring this back for the autumn, how are the public going to be able to have their input into the development of the strategy? I think it's important to consult with the sector, but what public engagement?
Do you want to do that?
Okay, yes, thank you, Councillor Hunt. As part of the brief that's going out, there is an expectation that there will be consultation, obviously, with partners, with the sector, but also some community consultation. I think LACS will probably be a good vehicle for that. And in fact, as you know, I'm coming to your next LAC meeting just to talk about the strategy, and we'll start have some initial discussions which will then feed into the fact-finding for the strategy. So the whole purpose of having a very in-depth piece of work is to allow some of the voices from different communities to be heard really clearly about what people want from their culture and arts offer in the city. And we will be obviously judging the submissions that we get from different consultants on the basis of their proposals for how they will manage that community engagement, as well as all the other levels of consultation within the process.
Councillor Hunt, was there any follow-up from that?
Just to say that sounds really a good approach to be adopting, and it's important that everyone's voices in the city are heard through this next process. So I'm pleased to hear that that will be factored into the decision-making process.
Councillor Perec, and after Councillor Perec, I see that Councillor Curtis Crossland also wants to make a contribution.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Soraya, just as she's leaving the room, and Rebecca and the whole team for your work on this. So one of the things I've been really infused by throughout is the focus on, the widest possible conception of the cultural sector. I did want to just check, I don't think this is a tension, because I think it can be worked through, but I think there can often be seen to be a tension between having that widest focus on culture in the cultural sector alongside maximising external funding and, the focus on Arts Council NPO bids, for example, and larger parts. And the Opera House is something I've heard thrown around a lot of. If we had an Opera House, would we get more billions in? I think, how do we retain that focus on those smaller and alternative cultural enterprises while also maximising external funding, and how is that being facilitated through this?
Well, I guess the good news is that the Arts Council, they're not the only funder of arts, but they are obviously a major one. Their current strategy, Let's Create, is very much about the grassroots, about democratising culture, about working with a whole range of communities, improving diversity, and getting away from this idea that culture equals opera or the Elgin Marbles. I mean, there's nothing wrong with opera, although I'm personally not that bothered about it. But, in the end, culture is about all the different things that people enjoy in their daily lives, and it can be, at an amateur, personal level, it can be exceedingly excellent. So, culture in Sheffield is about all of those things, and a whole range of different art forms. And I think we just need to be really open and kind of generous that all kinds of things are arts and culture, and all of them are really valuable, and there isn't a sort of hierarchy of value. Obviously, as a council, we do provide funding support to Sheffield theatres and Sheffield museums, because they are kind of civic spaces, and in particular the Sheffield museums care for the city's collection, which belongs to the people of Sheffield. But that's not to say that they are more important than grassroots activity in communities and in different art forms across the city. And I'm really hoping that our new cultural strategy makes that super clear. And therefore, in terms of financial support, while the City Council doesn't have a lot of money to provide financial support, there are other ways in which we can provide support through having this kind of overarching strategy, through signposting, through relationship building, through linking people together, which is something that I do quite a lot as well. And just sort of raising the understanding of culture, I think, within the city, so that the maximum number of people can benefit.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful and great to hear as someone whose friends are all involved in organising the DIY Club Nights, and democratising culture is music to my ears. So yeah, the more we can do to facilitate funding for that, the better.
Thank you. Councillor Crossland.
Thank you, Chair. I've quite enjoyed all the comments about how culture isn't just opera, because it isn't. So I think for the benefit of anybody who might be watching, would you be able to give us a brief update on the sort of the number of jobs that are attached to the cultural sector in Sheffield, the sort of the real life benefits that we get from that? And then I've got a couple more questions. I don't know if you want them.
Well, I'll answer that one first. I can't give you that figure straight off. It's worth noting that South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority commissioned a really great report last year looking at cultural and creative industries across South Yorkshire, and there's all kinds of brilliant figures in there. I seem to think that once you really sort of dig and take things into account, it's something like £1.3 billion that culture actually provides to the city region. I'd be really happy to dig that report out and circulate it to everybody, because I think it's useful information. Again, thinking about the makeup of the sector, there are a lot of individuals, like individual artists and creatives. They can be quite difficult to kind of capture that information, but that Simca report worked really hard to kind of rootle out different ways of trying to capture the size of the sector. So we are talking about a significant economic benefit, which is only, of course, one of the benefits that culture brings in terms of well-being, cohesion, quality of life, joyfulness, and education, and so much more.
Councillor Crossland, I think you had a few follow-up questions.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good to hear. And yeah, like you think of Liverpool and you think of the Beatles, don't you? So culture brings massive economic benefits to even marketing our city. So at the last meeting, we heard from Marketing Sheffield about the good job that they're doing at selling our city to the tourists. I wonder if there's some sort of cross-pollination that could be going on. Any research that they might have done that we can now take on, and any work that you might do that might help them market Sheffield as well. On a separate point, going back to what Councillor Dunn was talking about with the LACs and how different areas in the city sort of bring their own thing to the culture of the entire city. I don't know what our remit is on this, whether we could have something coming back to the committee at some point in the future about what tools LACs need to work on that and to move that forward. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it sounds like you've already done some work in the whatever LAC Walkley is in, sorry, about with culture there. Would you also be able to share what that is and how other LACs can take advantage of that as well, please?
Do you want to answer the first? Yeah, I'll take the first question. And I think just a bit of context. So prior to April, Culture sat with operations, and in April it moved over to my directorate as part of Marketing Sheffield and the Economic Directorate for exactly some of the reasons that you were highlighting. We've got businesses in the creative sector that need support, the employment skills team to support those businesses as well, but also because it's a critical tool in terms of placemaking and place marketing. So those conversations, now Rebecca sits with the marketing team essentially, and there is a lot of cross-pollination that's happening. A lot of what we talk about in the city externally is based on the cultural activity that happens here, and we are starting to look even more around how we event programme. So we've always done really great sporting events, and we've got some key cultural events that we've done, like the Phlegm exhibition a few years ago, and I think one of the things we're really wanting to do going forward is look at cultural events and how we can really do so much more of that on a bigger scale with cultural programming that can support tourism. The city did something like this a few years ago called Cultural Destinations, and we're looking to use SPF funding with Arts Council match. We're exploring that and potentially have about a £1.7 million programme going forward. So that'll be something that will be coming to this committee. We're just kind of looking at if that's possible now. But certainly that cross-pollination is absolutely starting to happen, and I think there's a lot more that we can do with it. But in the 6 months or so, probably a bit longer now, that Rebecca's been sat in kind of this directorate, it feels like it is bearing fruit. Thanks.
And then you had a question about toolkits for LACs or helping LACs to support culture or engage with culture. I think that's a really good idea, and I'm very happy to put it on my work list. It won't happen straight away. So at the moment, I've had an invitation to go to the Central LAC meeting, which is in a couple of weeks' time. I think on the back of the fact that the culture strategy is going to be refreshed and expanded, that will be an opportunity just to explain a bit about culture in the city. It'll be an opportunity to do a bit of consultation with those who are there about what they would like to see taking place, the kind of culture that they would like to see both in neighbourhoods and centrally in the city as well. So none of that is rocket science. That's just a bit of sort of speaking and listening, really. But I think the idea of a clearer sort of toolkit for LACs in the future is a really good one.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I think Curtis raised a point a short while ago, didn't he, about the wider economic impact of culture, and there was that specific South Yorkshire Mail Combined Authority report. Thank you very much for sending us that report, which I think will be very useful to see the wider impact. Are there any other contributions from members of the committee? Any other questions? So there are three recommendations from this report, which are contained on page 79 of our pack. The first one's to note the progress made in commissioning a wider, refreshed city culture strategy with the sector and partners for completion in autumn 2023. To note the outcomes of 3 expressions of interest and work being undertaken on other funding opportunities. And finally, to note the progress made in establishing a culture pipeline fund supported by South Yorkshire Mail Combined Authority resources. Councillor Masters.
Can we add an extra recommendation to that to sort of thank the work and applaud the work of the group? Because I think it's been excellent.
Councillor Masters, I think that's a wonderful suggestion. Can I just ask for some guidance from the Assistant Director of Legal and Governance as to whether we can add at this stage that item?
Well, I think we can offer some flexibility. Perhaps if the proposal is seconded, it can form part of the overall recommendations.
Councillor Perec, is that something that you are hoping to second? Or?
Yeah, I'm happy to formally second.
You can take the vote together then. Sorry.
Councillor Masters, have you got a form of words that you could propose to us? I think you did that very well a short while ago, but I think if you were just to say it again, we could note it down.
Thank the team for the excellent work in getting this far. I think that's a bit clumsy, but thanks got to be in there, team's got to be in there, and the progress. So, can anybody help me out on that? Look, come on. I have to think very carefully about this. I'm not good at mine.
How about it's under the Economic Development and Skills Committee is recommended to formally record its thanks to officers and external support for the work that has gone into preparing the final bit.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Thank you. Thank you. So officers and members of the public in their work on these related projects.
Could we add Culture Collective and Culture Consortium? They work with us heavily behind the scene. I know it's getting a bit long now, but it would be good to name check them.
So with the addition of the Culture Collective and Consortium, that will be a fourth recommendation. We've had that proposed by Councillor Masters and seconded by Councillor Perec. Are we all agreed on those four recommendations? If any member wishes to dissent, please do raise your hands. So that item and those four recommendations has been passed. Thank you very much to Rebecca and Soraya when she was here for presenting this and putting this piece of work together. Very much appreciated. That moves us on to item 10, which is a presentation that Diana Buckley is going to run us through in a short while about city goals to include an inclusive economy and wellbeing economy, which was referred, I understand, from full council in February 2022. Diana.
Thanks, everybody. So I've just got a short presentation and then I'm happy to take any questions. So this presentation builds on a paper that came to committee in June which detailed our refreshed economic evidence base for Sheffield, and through that report we identified the need for a new city economic framework or a city strategy, and whilst it highlighted some positive trends and opportunities, for example our highly skilled and qualified population.
Apologies, Councillor Turpin.
Just asking Chair or Diana if Curtis has been sent through the presentation. He needs to have it on his laptop.
Apologies, I didn't do that. Did Democratic Services?
I have a paper copy of the presentation that I'll just hand Councillor Crossland, if that's okay. No, thank you very much, Councillor Turpin.
Thank you, yeah. So I was just saying that this builds on a report that the committee took in June where we were looking at the economic evidence base, and that highlighted positive trends like a highly qualified population and a high business survival rate, but it also evident significant deprivation, child poverty and inequality in health and education across the city. So as such, this committee highlighted the need for that new city strategy, and that to be based on inclusive growth, to include wider economic factors such as sustainability and health and wellbeing. So our approach to this new city strategy, our city goals as we're calling them, will definitely be an inclusive growth strategy that will bring in sustainability and wellbeing as kind of key economic foundations really to move forward. And in the work progressed since that report in June, partners have acknowledged that in order to solve some of those really complex issues that we need to work differently and make sure that everybody is engaged and involved in this work around city goals, that in order to make the changes we need to make as a city, these goals and this strategy need to be co-developed and co-owned. So the presentation that I'm going to show you today is the work that we've been doing to make sure that that partnership and civic engagement is embedded in this strategy as we go forward. Just make sure I'm on the same page yet. I also think it's good to kind of think, why do we need our city goals and what the end might look like? So I'll just cover that briefly as well. Our city goals will be something that we can all stand behind as Sheffield, that we can talk about with one voice and kind of spell what the future of Sheffield would like to be. At the moment, everybody's probably got their own views of that, and I think when it comes to talking to government or to investors, certainly in my experience, it means we're not as powerful in terms of asking for what we want and in terms of articulating what we see for the future of Sheffield. So kind of bringing the city together behind a set of things with one voice is really important. I also think it'll help us to be clear about our priorities, so more people can get benefits from the best of the city, but it also can help us tackle some of the challenges together. And it will aid better collaboration. As I was saying, we need organisations, stakeholders and communities to work together to really change some of these deep ingrained economic issues that the city is facing. And if we've got a single focus on a set of goals, that will really enable collaboration in terms of people bringing resources and ideas together. So what will it look like if we have a set of goals for the city? Well, they'll drive our response to a changing and challenging world, really. So in terms of meeting net zero, in terms of fighting inequality, there's a lot of challenges that we need to do, and it will give us a roadmap for doing that. It will give that long-term vision to create Sheffield as a better place to live, work and play. And it'll also give us ideas and set the foundations for what our neighbourhoods will look like in the future. You know, what do people's journey to work look like? Where's the place that they live in? How is this impacting on health and well-being? So through setting these goals, it's not high-level strategic ambitions at some point. It is about how it feels for people to live in their locality, what is important to the people of Sheffield, and how do we recognise that in the city's future. And then how do we move from a high equality, low growth economy? I think, Tom, you mentioned earlier around how we do that. So what are some of the solutions that we can bring to bear? In terms of what would be different when we've got these city goals, we feel that it would enable city ownership of the priorities. So we've got citizens, communities and stakeholders shaping the plan and then collectively delivering it. So that responsibility doesn't sit with one organisation, but collectively across organisations and citizens in the city. It'll give us a coherent plan and a stronger platform for funding, not only for people like talking to the Arts Council, but when we're talking to government. Levelling Up was a good example where there was an opportunity to leverage some funding, and where we've got a really strong sense of what the vision of Sheffield is, it opens doors. So I think it'll help us leverage more funding, and I also think it will allow us to use the resources that we've got in the city better. So there are areas that the council might not be best placed to invest in or not able to, that some of our partners can, and with a clear plan that they've co-owned and co-invest in, we can collectively come around those priorities together and align resources in a much stronger way. So underpinning this work are a set of principles that I think it's just really important that we know how we're going to behave as we're doing this work, and this is really setting this up. So the city goals are aligned to be the long-term strategic direction for the city, so they are going to be that kind of North Star of where we're going to. The key thing that I've already mentioned is that they're co-produced and co-owned. So we are taking our time in terms of pulling this strategy together so we can really listen to members of the public, to stakeholders and communities, and make sure that their views and voices are represented in this work, because authorship breeds ownership, I think, if they can see themselves in a piece of work. We also thought it was important to build it on evidence, insight and local expertise, so that's why we grounded it in the economic assessment that this committee saw last year. And whatever the goals are, we want them to be underpinned by clear, measurable outcomes so we can track our progress against things. It should also be linked and informed by wider agendas and a catalyst for collective action and delivery. And I think I would like just to say here that if we do get, when we get to a set of city goals, that is just the starting point actually, and the real job is how we arrange ourselves and deliver in different ways with our communities and stakeholders on those goals. So we're kind of getting to step one in this piece of work, although it is a really important step. So just to say in terms of, let me move that on, thanks. What our goals would look like. And I think we discussed this at the last meeting, but just to remind people, there's been a decision by the partnership that's leading this work to move away from a city strategy. Kind of a strategy feels like a fixed document that often sits on a shelf, and we want something much more empowering that people can relate to. And other cities are using this example of city goals. So what's on the screen there is the UN Development Goals, which you might have heard of, that feel really accessible in terms of their language, really clear in what you're getting at. So that is acting as a guidepost to what our city goals should look and feel like for people, although we'll obviously do in Sheffield's version of that and listening to people on the way. There are other places that are moving to that already, so a lot of people are starting to talk about city goals as long-term ambitions rather than kind of strategic work. So Bristol, Manchester, other areas are already taking some steps in that. So we will be in good company. And then in terms of progress to date, so it was November 21 when actually we took a partnership paper to commission this new economic framework of what it could look like. Step one of that was the economic evidence base that we commissioned in January and came here in June. Also in June, a task and finish group was established as a subgroup of the city partnership. So on that board, Voluntary Action Sheffield, Social Enterprise Network, a Racial Equality Commissioner, both universities, the Chamber of Commerce, amongst others. So we've brought quite an inclusive partnership together of kind of new people and new faces to lead this work. They've been meeting every 3 weeks since June to drive this week for work forward. So my thanks to everything that they've been doing to support this work as it goes forward. In September, we started a piece of work called Collaborative Conversations, and that was working with the voluntary sector to get a set of champions, I think, in community organisations, in localities, that can have this conversation in communities with us and for us, to get us ready to really be engaged in the right places in Sheffield. In December, we also commissioned some external support to help us do this. One, because it takes some expertise, and two, to make sure it had a sense of independence and was owned by the partnership and not just the council, because I think that's critical going forward. And in January, the city partners came together with the comms group to kind of decide how we communicate this and what the engagement plan would be. So in terms of the project overview of what's coming next, towards the end of February and certainly within March, we're going to start what we're calling the listening phase. So this is not consultation, this is actual listening. So we're going out to kind of say to people, what is important to you? We're going to do that through a round of engagement workshops with stakeholders, through a digital survey, but also through community workshops and community pop-ups, through those collaborative conversation champions. And all of that first round of listening will help us start to inform what those draft goals will be. We'll work with the stakeholder group to design a first set of goals, which again would come back to here, and members would be involved in that first engagement phase anyway. And then when we've got that draft of goals, we would then have a second round of engagement where we go back to partners, communities and stakeholders to test, do these look like what you've told us? How do you like these goals? And then we'll co-develop them. And actually we're looking at a digital tool to enable that to be done kind of live online as well throughout that period. The idea is that we'll have a full iteration of the goals for June or July to go out for consultation and to be adopted. I'll just say that the final thing that we're really wanting to do is to kind of engineer that co-delivery. So we're asking all partners that are involved in this work to take through the city goals for formal endorsement and adoption by whatever their governing body might be, so the universities or different groups to do so. So in terms of what we need from you, we really would like you to champion the Our City Goals work, to engage yourselves and your communities that you represent in the workshops and in the surveys. Help us connect to community groups in your areas that might be important, to businesses or key organisations in your localities. I'd like you guys to be able to listen to the feedback from the stakeholder sessions and the citizens that we're getting. So we will continually push through some of the outputs from these sessions to you, so you can hear at the same time as we're hearing. And obviously attending some of those sessions yourself so you can hear it firsthand is so valuable. Although I'm sure a lot of you will be hearing it firsthand anyway. Then we'd like you to help shape the development of the goals, and then again we'll be looking to adopt them as the council around July time. So I'll leave it there. Any questions?
Thank you, Dana. The presentation is simply for us to note, but are there any questions or comments from members of the committee about this outstanding piece of work? Councillor Turpin. I can't see anyone else, so you get that pleasure.
Thanks, Diana. You've been doing brilliant on this, and I know that this was something you started work on when I was on the exec last year, and it has come quite a long way, and it's been really valuable to, again, it seems we're talking about a lot of joined up working at the moment and a lot of community collaboration, and I know that's something you're really passionate about and also very good at, and that's how you've been getting such fantastic results. So yeah, firstly, thank you. Secondly, I just wanted to note that, you know, the tackling inequalities in the city is something that, you know, is or certainly should be a priority of everybody in this council and certainly everybody in this room. And we look at, for example, you know, you could look at the southwest of Sheffield with a greater amount of wealth compared to the northeast of Sheffield with one of the lowest amounts of wealth. You can also look at those two opposite corners of the city with air quality. The southwest has the cleanest air, the northeast has the dirtiest air. You can then also look at expected healthy life expectancy. Again, southwest, the longest, northeast, the shortest by 20 years. You know, it's no coincidence that those metrics and others pan out in those areas consistently. And until those inequalities are reduced, you know, we are failing, Sheffield is failing, and really we don't want winners and losers, we want everybody to be a winner. I don't really have a question to ask unless you've got something to respond, but yeah, that is what I want from the city goals, basically, and hopefully that's the way we're going. Thank you.
Thank you. And I mean, tackling inequalities is something that we are hearing from everybody as part of this project, and it came through really strongly in the economic evidence-based piece of work. So I feel like it'll actually absolutely be a priority within those goals. I think what we need to do as well is be really clever in looking at where we can affect change. So we know that the experience that you have as a child informs your life chances. So where do we really focus in action to make long-term change? I think that's some of the work that we want to be trying to do through the goals and bringing people together. And thank you for the comments about myself. I did just want to acknowledge, though, the task group that is pulled together for this. I've never worked with such a passionate, brilliant set of people who are kind of really empowering me and their own communities in leading this work, and it does feel different. It doesn't feel like we're developing something as the council that other people are going to adopt. It genuinely feels like it's kind of being co-owned and co-developed, and I think that's so important. So just want to kind of go on record to thank them as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Diana. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Diana. And yeah, let me add my thanks to you and to that wider team for the work that's gone into this, because I think what it shows is that the process here is an essential part of having a successful set of goals at the final stage later in the year. You know, this nothing about us without us principle needs to run all the way through, and that's why this listening phase is really key next over the next few months. And I think what we'll hear is ambition from the people of Sheffield to take a long-term approach to some of those big challenges that Councillor Turpin has talked about that shape life chances in this city. And so, you know, we don't want to obviously prejudge what we're going to hear, but I'm sure, knowing, you know, the conversations that we will have, that we'll get that sense of ambition. And I'd like to see a set of really, you know, big picture, long-term goals that stretch us to want better for our city. And I think it's also really important that the set of goals, when they're presented back to the people of Sheffield later in the year, come with a kind of shared narrative that everyone is able to recognise themselves within and see how they would, they and their communities would flourish over the next however many years we set out for this city goals work. So I think, you know, this is a hugely exciting piece of work, and yeah, looking forward to seeing what comes through from it.
Thank you. Yes, it is extremely exciting, and I agree, taking our time on the process is fundamental. Thanks.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you very much for that piece of work, which will have some serious longevity in our city, and hopefully tackle many of the issues that we feel so passionately about inequality in our society and city. Are there any further contributions about this particular report? Can't see any. So the report that Dana presented towards us in the presentation doesn't have any recommendations, but it is simply to note, are we all agreed? If any member wishes to dissent, please raise your hand. So that has been agreed, and we have noted that particular report. Thank you very much, Dana, for presenting that to us today. And there's clearly a lot of support about the work that continues to be ongoing. That does conclude our meeting today. The date of the next meeting is confirmed as Wednesday, the 15th of March 2023 at 10 a.m, early in the morning. So I look forward to seeing you all there, and thank you very much.